Right now, you're looking at me through a $200 4K webcam. And now you're looking at me through a camera and lens setup that costs $5,000. This is the YoloCam S3, which has become one of the best webcams I've ever used. And I know it's kind of goofy to compare it to my Sony FX3 because they do very different things. The FX3 is a full-on cinema camera, can do a lot of things that the $200 webcam cannot do. But if we're looking at general image quality, especially for the intended use of a webcam, it's pretty impressive that this camera, the S3, can even compare at all to the FX3. And for the past month or two, I've been using the S3 as a second or third camera a lot of times with my FX3 and mixing in the footage, and it has worked just fine. Now, this is a very compact webcam. The camera itself is hardly any bigger than the actual sensor of my Sony FX3, so you're not going to get like the same blurry background necessarily. If I hold something up to the camera though and it focuses on it, then you do get kind of a nice, shallow depth of field, blurry background look, and you also do get some really quick autofocus. Now, if I change the aperture on my FX3 and take away some of the background blur, now these shots probably are a little more comparable. This is the Sony FX3, and this is the YoloCam S3. So the whole reason I'm starting off with this Sony camera and YoloCam comparison is just to emphasize how great I think this webcam is. Now, even though I'm saying a lot of positive things, this is not a sponsored video. The camera was sent to me at no cost to provide feedback, but I'm under no obligation to make a video, do anything, or say anything. I've just been using it, and from the day I got it, I have been hugely impressed with this camera, especially as I've been exploring the world of more modern webcams. Finding something in that sweet spot of a couple $100s that really performs well, really looks awesome, and is very easy to recommend is something I'm really excited about. So what the heck is the S3? It is a very compact, super nice USB webcam. There's only a single USB port. The camera has a metal frame to dissipate heat. I've been leaving it on for hours and hours every day to kind of test it. I've never had it overheat, but it does get warm, and that's why it has a metal casing, is to dissipate heat. So the fact that I'm feeling it get warm right now is actually a good thing, because all of the heat I'm feeling is heat that's not staying inside the camera, because it is specifically designed to be a camera that's used for longer streams, longer events, longer recordings. They really did build it with that in mind, and I think that's pretty cool. As far as mounts go, there's no quarter 20 or anything directly on the camera, but there are two magnets, one on the bottom and one on the side. So if you want to use it horizontally or you want to use it vertically, you can do that pretty easily. And if you do need a quarter 20 mount, the monitor stand has one on the bottom. So this actually has a super strong magnet that the camera can sit on right there. And then this can attach to your monitor or whatever, I guess. And then it can also position the camera a little bit in kind of some cool ways. And there's a quarter 20 on the bottom. And it is super, super strong, both horizontally and vertically. So that's kind of cool, because also, since it's a magnet, that means you can stick it on anything that's metal. It does not have to just be the camera stand. If you have something like these metal workbenches, you can just smack the camera right on there and you're good to go. And now, coming back over here to the S3, I wanted to take it off so I could actually show you the camera, but I also want to use the camera as much as possible. It does not have a built-in microphone, so you need to do audio separately. And at first you might think, wouldn't it be nice if the camera just did everything? A built-in camera and a built-in microphone. But honestly, I've never found a webcam with a built-in microphone that I would actually use. They've all been kind of disappointing or barely passable at best. The thing I have used webcam microphones for in the past is basically just scratch audio. So if I'm recording with a webcam and I'm recording separately, I can use the webcam's bad audio to sync up. So I think, based on what Yolo told me, their logic behind that was that the camera looks really good, and including a super small compact microphone in that form factor at that price point that matched the image quality, it's just something that wasn't really practical. So it made more sense to focus on delivering good image quality, and then you just get a different microphone. Any USB microphone, any wireless microphone setup, doesn't even matter if it's like the cheapest ones you can find, are going to be a huge step up from pretty much what any webcam has to offer. But speaking of what this webcam has to offer, as you're looking at me on the Sony FX3, this camera is known for low light performance, and it should be for the price, but the S3 over here also has really impressive low light performance, and that's kind of what I've been using it a lot for. My main use case personally has been just streaming games to Discord with friends, and in that case I am not using all of these bright lights. So over here on my FX3, this is pretty much what it's like in person in here when I'm sort of just hanging out and playing games with friends, and that's when I'm using the S3 a lot. There's basically just this desk lamp that's on. Actually, this light's not even on usually. So just this desk lamp, and then I have some market lights. You can sort of see the reflection. They're kind of hung on the ceiling there. I have some market lights that sort of give some ambiance. And what you're seeing right now is very much what it looks like in person. But over here, using auto exposure on the S3, it boosts the ISO a bit, and it kind of is like night vision. I can see things here that I can't like see with as much detail in person, which is kind of crazy. And so when I'm not using all of my studio lights, but I just want to have a camera on to, like, you know, do something casual or hang out with friends or whatever, this still looks awesome, to the point where I've sort of become like an influencer among friends who now all want to buy the S3. So just using the camera has sort of done its job on like selling people on it's a good camera. And if I go to a lighting setup like this, which is kind of as bright as like sort of a typical office, a typical room would be, maybe it's a little bit dim. And over here on the S3 using auto exposure, it still looks really awesome. So keeping in mind that a $200 webcam is something at least I like to recommend to people who maybe aren't camera people. They just want to be able to plug something in and have it look good. This kind of in any lighting situation will get the job done. And of course, if you're in a really bright environment or something where you've intentionally placed lights and tried to make things look as good as possible, you can also get some great results. So when I use this, I just keep it on manual exposure, so that way it just stays the same and it doesn't kind of shift around or anything. Now going over here to my FX3, which has had its aperture at 4.5 for a little bit now, this is where, even though the S3 has an f1.85 lens, you're not going to get the same depth of field because of the smaller aperture, the smaller sensor, as you would on a full frame camera. And this is true for basically any compact camera or webcam. Going back over here to my FX3 and then opening up the aperture all the way to f1.4, now you have some really nice background separation. Of course, that looks awesome. This is a benefit of a full frame camera with a prime lens, you know, just sort of a higher end camera. That's not what a camera like the S3 over here is supposed to do. Now, Yolo does have the S7, which is pretty much in the middle. It's more expensive at $800, but it is a micro four thirds mirrorless webcam. I need to do a separate video all about this because it's really nifty. So this is one where you can change your lenses. You can put on prime lenses. You can get super wide apertures and super shallow depths of field, but it also comes at a price, more depth in your bank account to make that happen. And that's in addition to other cameras like the Sony ZV-E10 or other more traditional mirrorless cameras that will help you get that shallow depth of field look. But again, that's not what a $200 webcam is intended to do. And when I think of what it's intended to do, and even beyond that, this looks ridiculously good to me. And if you do position yourself a little bit closer to the camera, like right now, I'm just past an arm's length away, so almost 3 feet, almost a meter away from the camera. I'm filling up a lot of the frame. I'm getting a little bit of background blur because there's a lot of distance between my background over here and I'm closer to the camera. And as you can see, the autofocus does work quite well. I've been using this a lot as an overhead camera for videos. So there's a camera overhead, and a lot of times when you're doing that, you need to hold stuff up and show the camera. And when I'm using it as an overhead camera, if I pop something up in front of the camera, it focuses on it really well, really clearly, and then when I go back, it pops right back to me or whatever the main subject is really quickly. So not every webcam has autofocus. More of them do nowadays, which is really nice. But this can do face autofocus. It can do continuous sort of like subject autofocus, or it can do manual focus. So if you ever did find yourself in a situation like super low light where you didn't want to use auto exposure, like then it can, maybe the focus would kind of hunt because it's very, very dark and the camera kind of can't see things. If that's happening, you could switch it into manual focus and then you're gonna kind of lock in your focus. So now to go through the software, I've got the S3 set up basically the way I have it when it's just sort of at my desk and at my computer. It's normal computer webcam mode. And I have the YoloLiv Compose software right here, so we can kind of go through some of the settings and you can see what you're able to adjust. The camera, like most webcams, has no physical controls on it, so you need to adjust everything through the software. Now it's up to you if you want to use Yolo's proprietary software, or if you just want to use something like you can throw it into Ecamm or OBS or whatever and do some camera adjustments there. But I have found that a lot of the really important settings to adjust are in this software. So what I tend to do is make my core settings here and then add any other, minor adjustments in whatever software I'm using. Like right now I'm recording in Ecamm Live, so I can kind of like tweak a couple things there if I want, but getting the core image set it's good to do in this software here. So just kind of starting at the top, let's close all these, go right to the top up here. We have graphics settings. This is where you can choose if you want it to be landscape or vertical. So if you're doing vertical video, you can choose it for 9:16 and it will automatically kind of orientate everything that way. And then frame rate is, you have a few options from, oh, I'm using it so I can't, oh, I need to turn on the screen mode there, and then I can open the frame rate. So we can go from 25, 30, 50, or 60. They use the term hertz, but it kind of hurts my brain a little bit because I think that's FPS, not necessarily hertz. Hertz usually I think has to do with electrical flicker and stuff. So when you're seeing this part, at least currently in the software, and it says hertz, you're thinking FPS. So 60 FPS is what gives me kind of the smoothest motion, even though right now in Ecamm, I'm actually set to record at 30 FPS, which is what this whole video has been set at. 60 just makes things look really, really smooth. If we go down to image settings, then we do have some basic image adjustments that we can do. We can do sharpness, contrast, saturation, all the things you would expect. And there is also a lens shading correction option. So you kind of notice the shot got a lot brighter when I clicked that button. A lot of camera lenses sort of have a bit of a vignette to them. So if you look at the edges, you can kind of see that it's dark. This is normal with kind of all cameras. And like if you take photos and you put photos into something like Adobe Lightroom, there's like lens correction settings, which sort of get rid of that vignette. And so this is sort of similar. It kind of evens out the exposure across the whole frame, which is a thing that sometimes looks great and sometimes to me looks a little webcam-y, but it's not necessarily bad. I usually leave that off because adding that vignette and that kind of look is sort of what makes it sort of look like a regular camera, and that makes it easier for me to mix in footage from this camera with my other cameras. So that's just personal preference. If you like the way that it looks like this, awesome. If you don't, then you don't have to use it. It's totally up to you. And you do have different autofocus settings. Like I mentioned earlier, there's face autofocus, which is the one you'll probably want to leave on most of the time, since most people I think are going to be using this camera to film somebody with a face. But if you're not filming a person, you want something else, you do have AFS, which is single subject. So this will just pick a subject, but it's not necessarily going to be a person. It's gonna be whatever the subject is in the frame. And then you have continuous autofocus, which will just focus on whatever happens to be in the frame, but it's not necessarily going to like track the focus or stick to it. It's just going to try to, it's almost like old school autofocus. But it's nice to have all three of these to cover whatever situation you might find yourself in, and I just keep it on face autofocus because that's what I do most of the time. Like I mentioned, there is a zoom option here, so I can zoom in. There it is. Oh, that is so uncomfortable. This is a digital zoom. God, this is so uncomfortable. But if you notice, it doesn't really lose a lot of quality. We'll zoom back out though. It does a good job of, even though it's a digital zoom, not looking all pixely and garbagey and stuff. So if you need to reframe shots, or you need to zoom in on something, or you're holding up something that has really small details and you want those to be clear, you can zoom in right there. Now, AI parameters are kind of an interesting thing. Basically, if you click start here, it's going to analyze the scene and then essentially auto adjust all the settings. It's like fully automatic settings that are tailored to your specific scene. That can be really helpful if you really don't know what to do and you just want things to look decent. Press start, let it run through its thing, and then it will kind of update everything for you. Since I'm in this environment and I'm very picky, I like to be in full control because I'm also a bit of a control freak, so I haven't used that as much. I like going down into the exposure settings where I can control everything manually, or even just use simple auto exposure, which, as I showed earlier, when I turned off the lights, works really, really well. Right now I have my ISO set to 800, and then I also have my shutter speed at 1/60, so you can control shutter speed too. If I turn that to auto, it's just going to kind of adjust everything for me, and then I can bump up the compensation. Do I want it to be a little bit brighter? Do I want it to be a little bit darker? But I can't control ISO or shutter speed when it's in automatic. That's pretty much the case for every camera. It's doing everything for you. If you want to have specific settings, then manual is the way to go. And if you're in an environment like this where the lighting and stuff is not going to change that much, it's probably a good idea to get comfortable using those manual controls for the best results. White balance. I love that there's a white balance option. I have manual white balance turned on right now. If I turn on auto, this actually looks kind of awesome. It makes things a bit warmer. Because I need all the help being cool I can get, I like to use manual white balance and then turn things down a little bit cooler. It's just, I don't know, that's just a personal style preference thing. So I have my white balance set to 4800, and then you can also do blue and red offset. So right now, if I change the blue, you can kind of see things get even colder, or now they kind of go a little bit more green there, and same with the red offset. Since I use Sony cameras, which tend to lean a little bit more green on the spectrum, it's really nice to be able to sort of turn down the reds and then even turn down some of the blues. And when I have the picture profile set up kind of like this is what I have found is easiest to mix in with my Sony cameras. And once you get everything set the way you like it, you can click on Save Scene, and that way you can save your presets. So if I was filming like at this desk setup with these settings, I could have one preset, and then if I'm filming like over there with different lighting and different cameras, I could have different presets. If I want to mix it with Sony cameras, if I want to mix it with Canon cameras and I need, you know, different profiles to kind of fit those, I can just save everything right here and load it up super easily. All of these settings are saved directly to the camera. So now that I have the software open and I've saved everything, or I don't even have to save the scene actually. All the changes I've made are just automatically saved to the camera. So now if I take it and I plug it into something else, like a different computer that doesn't have the YOLO software installed, or even like the YOLO box where it's just a USB webcam, it will look like this, however I have it set in whatever those devices are, even if I don't have the YOLO software running. So if the S3 is not really intended to compete against cameras like the FX3, what is it intended to compete against, and how does it compare against some other simple webcams like the ones I've talked about lately? First off, I do think that multiple things can be true at once. The S3 can be a great webcam, and an OBSBOT webcam can be a great webcam. It doesn't have to be one or the other, but I kind of think, at least with the cameras I've been exploring recently, that there's sort of one for kind of every need, and the S3 is kind of the perfect sweet spot in the middle. So for example, this is the OBSBOT Tiny 2, which is another 4K webcam that I've talked about recently, and I really like this camera and it works great. And something it can do that the YoloCam can't do is this right here. It can track me, it can move around because it is a PTZ webcam. The YoloCam S3 is just a regular webcam. It's just like a regular camera. It records what you point it at, and that's it. It doesn't have any kind of tracking or anything like that. But if you want something that's like a PTZ camera, then something like this OBSBOT Tiny 2 could be a choice for you. This specific camera though has an MSRP of $300, so it is a bit more expensive than the S3. It's $100 more expensive than the S3, but there are other PTZ cameras that fall in line, kind of in line with the price of the S3 and even a little lower, but their image quality isn't there. So even between these two, this is the OBSBOT and then this is the S3 over here. I think this looks more like a real camera, if you know what I mean. And so it kind of depends on what you need. Do you need that real camera look as much as possible, or do you need the versatility of a PTZ webcam? So just different tools for different jobs. But then what about this camera that I recently made a video about, which is the OBSBOT Meet 2? This is the least expensive webcam that I own. This has an MSRP of $130, although it's very common to find on sale for less than that. I got mine for about $100. And this is it is another 4K webcam. So in some ways kind of similar to the S3, but definitely not the same in terms of quality. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have a place, because just like I explained in my video for the Meet 2, when you're talking about a webcam at this price point, actually let me plug this in. This is still a really awesome webcam, and at this price point, for someone, whether they're looking to try to, you know, create content on a budget, or they just need something that's better than the built-in webcam on their computer, or they don't have a built-in webcam on their computer and they just need something to kind of get video and image, you know, a lot of times for work and school and that sort of thing. This is such an easy camera to recommend, and at that price point, it's easy for people who aren't camera people, who aren't gear people, to decide, yeah, I can buy that, it's no problem. And this also is a camera that does have some decent autofocus, so that's pretty cool. It's got really fast autofocus. I was impressed that a camera this small had autofocus built into it. So going back over here to the S3, I think you're getting a significant leap in image quality compared to the Meet 2, but it is a $200 webcam versus what is essentially a $100 webcam. But I still think that's why the S3 is kind of in this really nice sweet spot. If you want just kind of the budget entry-level option to get a decent image with no muss, no fuss, and as little money as possible, you have options like the Meet 2. If you need more specific features like PTZ tracking, then you have options like the Tiny 2, keeping in mind that you will need to spend about $300 like on this camera to get image quality that's on the same level, although I still think the S3 does have overall better image quality. There are less expensive PTZ cameras, but they also have you kind of lose image quality to gain the PTZ functionality. This is sort of where you kind of get good image quality and good PTZ, but it's at that higher price point. So $200 for the S3, I really do think is that sweet price point where if you want to invest in a webcam, you don't have an unlimited budget, but you do kind of want the best image quality you can get for your money, this is definitely the way to go. But that's just my opinion. If you want to check out some of the other webcams that I've talked about today, like the Meet 2, or even some of the higher end webcams like the OBSBOT Tail 2, which let me tell you is a pretty awesome camera, check out these videos right here.